Okay, are we rolling? Good morning, everyone, and thank you and congratulations for getting yourselves to this seminar. Now, as a middle-aged guy, which I officially am today, it is my birthday today. I'm 44 years old today, and I think that thank you very much. Much appreciated, and I'm pressing buttons by accident, I think. So as a middle-aged guy, I think I'm going through a middle-aged crisis or something along those lines, but I'm starting to change priorities in life. I had a very good youth and a very turbulent youth, which has given me a lot of experience, and I must say that I'm very happy with how things are going. But now that I'm hitting middle age, I'm starting to think and hope for something that I've never thought and hoped for before. I hope to be healthy, so it's the first time I'm thinking about this. I hope to be reasonably fit so that I can spend my energy with my grandchildren, with my children, to watch them grow. And one thing which is new to me is I hope to be financially stable. So we live in a pretty crazy world. I don't know how our kids are going to buy and build properties because of the prices and whatnot. So in the crazy world that we live today, I think one of the biggest priorities that I have is that I am self-sufficient, self-financed, and my children are not burdened by actually trying to support me when I get to my old age. And I think that most of us think along these hopes and think along these lines, and that's why most of us came here, to get as much information as we possibly can about something that exists and not many people know about. So this is an educational seminar. Please keep your wallets in your pockets. The minimum you will get from this seminar is some drinks, coffee, and breakfast. We are not here to sell you anything. We are here to provide you with information. Information is power. The more you are informed about something, I think the more viable your decision-making can be when you're making decisions. We've got another person coming. Fashionably late, the Chinese Hercules himself. Vic, please come and sit somewhere within the circle. Thank you, Ben. Yeah. So Vic is a friend of mine, and luckily he knows my story. I'm talking about my midlife crisis and about how I'm trying to actually build wealth for my retirement. It would be irresponsible for us to try to give you any financial advice. This is not what this seminar is about. It's not a sales advice. And the reason it's irresponsible to give you any advice is because we actually don't know most of you. Some of you I do for 30 years or so, but most of you I don't. And unless we have information, yep, come in. Are you bringing those here? Are you sure? Yes, you can bring them in. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
You are on camera. Say hello.
Thank you.
Very good. So I'll continue. It would be quite irresponsible for us to try to give you any direct advice because we don't know your personal situations. How old somebody is, how many children they have, how much superannuation you have are all determining factors in what you want, need, and strategize to do. So we are here to give you as much information as we can about your options. And please, extract as much information from us as you can. Don't be afraid and shy to ask questions. We have the very good-looking expert here with us, Alan, which I will introduce in a second. But it's in your interest to try to get as informed as you can. So please either write down questions on your phones and put them in the parking lot. A lot of people park their cars in the same spots, and when we get to the question and answers, we will revisit that car park, and I'm sure that we'll answer many questions at once, especially if they land in the same spot. Almane Colective. Alan Damjanovic, this very good-looking guy here, apart from now being my new boss, is also my brother-in-law. Alan has started Almane Group, which has now merged into Almane Colective, along with our partners, the very good-looking assassin in the black, Benny, and his friend Kai have partnered up in the company, and we have decided to scale this business because it seems to be a very, very viable and working program, as Betty has come to realize. Betty's been a financial advisor, and Betty has figured out the culture code for wealth in Australia. What is the culture code for wealth in Australia? I think it's property. I think all around the world, when we look at somebody rich, we're going to look at what house they have, what apartments they own, Ferrari, yachts, and whatnot. But basically, tangible properties, I think, are the biggest indicators of somebody's wealth. And I think automatically we actually look at these tangible properties as real wealth. If somebody shows me their bitcoins or share portfolios, it's more numbers on a computer. But if they show me an apartment, well, then I know I can get a glass of water, use the toilet, and lock the door because it's there and it exists. Who am I? I'm a newly middle-aged guy who is starting to think about the future. I feel very, very old when I say that. I'm not that old, but when I do get old, I hope I'm going to be as good-looking as Rob. That's one of my big hopes. The other hopes that I have are the ones I mentioned, and it feels great to talk about hope. It feels great and it feels positive, but it's completely useless. So I come from a professional sports career. I hoped to become a millionaire and win and famous and have 500 girlfriends and 16 cars. And hoping is not something that's going to help any of us, but actually taking action and informing ourselves is what makes the difference. Information itself is very useful, but the difference is how you use that information. And the whole objective of this seminar, which is our next slide, is to give you as much information, and please make it a priority for yourselves to extract as much information as you want. Because if you understand this, then you will understand that there is more options than what the usual suspects make. And that is leaving your money in a traditional super, mostly, I think, out of fear that super is one thing you cannot squander. I think the cultural code for super is something along the lines of security and safety, maybe generational wealth. A lot of people see that the super systems are going up at 7 to 9%, which is fact, as are properties as well, but nobody really wants to tinker with something just in case they stuff up. Well, if you're going to tinker with your super, then you have to be very, very analytical about what you're going to do with it and why you will do that. I think the property market is clearly something that in this country, on this continent with a small population, is a very viable choice. And I think that that's why a lot of people choose properties over other types of investments once they are actually informed of how to do that. And not to mention the building costs and the price of properties now to buy from personal accounts has become very, very difficult. But a lot of us, and looking at the demographic, we have similar ages, I think, apart from Rob. So I think that understanding that giving an advantage to your kids is something they will probably really, really need. And honestly, that is my priority, and I'm pretty sure that those of you that have kids are thinking along the same lines. We don't want to sell you anything, so once again I have to mention this because of legal reasons. If you have an accountant, if your sister or brother or friend is an accountant, a solicitor, a real estate agent, somebody who understands the industry, well, then you should use them, you should talk to them, you already have trust with them, and you should try to get as much information from here, and then you could talk to other people who can give you information about what they think you should do with that. Our company does do exactly this. But this is something that you have to be interested in, and this is something that you need to understand before we talk about that at all. Or before you decide that you want to talk to us about that, which is not going to happen in this seminar. There is a consultation session that is offered for free, and that is where you can actually reveal some of your personal circumstances, such as your age, your plans, possibly financial positions and jobs. And this would be a very, very good opportunity for you to get information that is tailored a little bit more towards you. But for now, it's about making you understand everything about the system. So, to get to the nitty-gritty of the seminar, the first slide says, why real estate and not shares? Well, we mentioned the culture code, but how about a rhetorical question such as, if you now mysteriously found $300,000 on your bank account, how many of you would go out and buy shares, Tesla or whatever shares you think might work? And how many of you would actually prefer to go buy a 2-bedroom apartment in Kangaroo Point, somewhere in Melbourne, somewhere in Sydney? Vic, I said it was a rhetorical question, but I will put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think real estate is more likely to go off shares. It's more volatile. You don't know what's going to happen.
Vic is a very smart guy. He's actually jumping ahead and he's actually giving reasoning, which is what I also want to do. But if you do believe that property is something that makes sense in this country, and if you look at statistics and historical data, well, it's quite obvious, as are actually shares. Shares have been positively moving on average. There have been a lot of hiccups and volatility, which we'll get into in a second. And I think that properties are immune to this volatility, and this is what makes them the real security. So having shares and bitcoins is something which is virtual. Having an apartment, well, it's there. It's something that we see as real. If we look at the difference between a strategized SMSF, a self-managed super fund, and the traditional share portfolio, UniSuper, QSuper, there's a million trusts or companies which do this. Most of you are connected to similar ones. The control is in the fund manager's hands. Who is your fund manager in QSuper? Who is your fund manager in UniSuper? Zsolt, have you had a beer with him or a coffee with him? So the fund manager is somebody who you don't know. How many children does he or she have? What education? What do they know about you? What do they know about your personal circumstances? Absolutely nothing. It's a volatile investment. Vic already started this. Shares are something which run along the lines of human emotion. Shares are very powerful because of their liquidity in the right hands. But these are financial advisors, economists, people who understand things in a different way than the average mortal, such as us, unless we have an accountant or somebody working in finance directly. Shares are something you can click on a computer with 3 clicks. You can buy them, you can sell them. And selling a property is certainly more than 3 clicks on a computer screen. So the volatility of the shares is what makes them powerful in the right hands. But this is 0.01% of the population because they strategize. They are not emotional. Most people and shares are volatile because of human emotion. When things are difficult, somebody will sell, which will create a chain reaction of sales, and the shares will drop. This is what we call swings in the market. They are based on human emotion, political situations, geographic, whatever you want to call it. We had COVID, we had the GFC, we have a zombie apocalypse coming up. God knows where this world is leading to, but it's definitely going to shake up a lot of emotions, which gives volatility to the market. The industry super fund runs at 7 to 9%. That is true. Those are positive numbers. In fact, it's very similar to the share market. So shares are also running in similar numbers, possibly 1 or 2% up. But when we get to this side, you will understand why this seminar is important and why you need to understand the concept of leverage. This is your key word for today, guys, leverage. There's an increasing annual management fees, so super companies are taking percentages of your profits. They're paying their workers, the administration, there's fees. These are actually not outlined when you get your portfolio or when you get your yearly report. It just says costs to run. Salaries go up, inflation happens, so a lot of the times they're paying their people more or less. You actually don't know how they're spending your money. We do know that they're investing and we know what they're investing in, but how much does it cost to run and set up all of that? That's something that you're unaware of. It's not a tangible asset. So as we already mentioned, they are numbers on a computer. You feel like you have them, but do you really? Can you go and buy something with them? Because when you buy something, you own that. When you spend the money, that's your money. So keeping money on a virtual screen is not something people believe in as much as keeping money in brick and mortar and the tangibility of the asset. And it's not a leverageable asset. So I've already mentioned that leverage is your key word for today. Leverage means that you cannot get a loan. Leveraging your money and getting a loan to use your money for bigger and greater things is what this seminar is about. You cannot go to the bank and tell them, I have $200,000 and I would like to buy $500,000 worth of Tesla shares. Please give me $300,000 loan. The bank will not give you that because of the volatility. If you have an apartment, well, they can take the apartment and they're covered and they will give you a loan. So quickly jumping to the other side. So we talked about the volatility of the shares and the fact that they're emotional. Properties are not. You cannot click buttons. It's a process to sell. It's a cost to sell. It's a stress to sell, as it is a stress to buy. But the selling part is the fact that it's not so easy to sell is what keeps them safer, I think. They're tangible. Fixed annual management fees, you know exactly how much your repayments are, you know how much you're renting for, you know how much the management that's renting and handling the paperwork, you know how much your accountant costs, you know how much money you're spending every single year. So you can actually budget, you can calculate when you purchase. This is part of the strategy. SMSF property investments ranged from 15 to 20% when leveraged. Now the contradiction is I said that the super funds, the traditional super funds are running similar to properties, 7 to 9%. So how do we get to 15 to 20% when leveraged? Well, let's find out. It's historically proven to be safe, stably rising. It's a good investment option. It's a big continent. It's a small population. It's a good economy. A lot of us here look ethnic. There's a reason why we are here. Life is easier in this country, and having property and safety property and safety in this country is something that we are all here for. If not for us, then for our children, that's for sure. And the control is in your fund manager's hands. Well, who is your fund manager in the shares? We don't know, but the fund manager in your SMSF is you. So Sigmund Freud said, nobody loves you more than you love yourself, and nobody cares for you more than you yourself, not even your mother. That guy liked to talk about mothers a lot, but I think he's right. So being in control of your super and having the feeling of having control over your super in a market is very important to me. So to me, this is something which was a key point. Now, how do we do something different? How do we actually manage to do an SMSF investment? How do we buy property with our super? The process has been broken down into 4 steps. This is what we do. We provide functionality of these 4 steps. We have people that can help you do this. But the first thing that I mentioned, this is not a sales seminar. We don't actually make money on any of these processes. We actually help clients. But if you have a sister, if you have a cousin, if you have a friend who is an accountant who can help you with any of these steps, if you know a solicitor for the sale, well then we are more than happy to work with them, or you can work with them directly to make your decisions. The second step is research. Well, what you buy makes a big difference. Alan, we'll use his real name, is connected to over 300 developers in Australia. Some people have strategies to buy outside of Brisbane. Some people want to buy inside of Brisbane. It's completely open. That's where that consult, where we get a little bit of information and knowledge about your strategies really do make a difference. But the property needs to be researched because you need to rent and buy something. Welcome, grab a seat, man, anywhere you want. So the whole point of the research is you need to have somebody who understands the market, understands Brisbane, understands potential development. Thank you. Oh, there's a chair here, yeah? So somebody who's going to give you a strategy of what to buy, for what reason, is it rentable, is it going to be rentable on a long term, on a short term, Airbnb, booking, do you want students, do you want whatever you like, basically. But the research part is the one where you have to know that you have to understand the market so that the potential of the market can be exploited, short term, mid term, and obviously long term. Being a super seminar, the long term is the point, because that's how you avoid tax, but it doesn't constantly or necessarily have to be long term. The point is to try to make it long term and make sure you keep it there. Buying the property is as simple as buying a property with your personal account. There's absolutely no difference in procedure. You will need a solicitor, you will need a building inspection, you will need pest control. You can organize your own if you need help, so if you need a solicitor, if you need pest control. Well, there's plenty of companies, there's plenty of people we work with, but you can also just type in Google and I'm sure you're going to find somebody decent. And the fourth step is the step that most people overlook, and that's the management of your investment. Who's going to collect the money? Who's going to find the tenants? Who's going to pay for the electricity bills? Who's going to give the invoices after they pay to the electricity bills to your accountant or to our accountant? This is all something that you can do yourselves. You can log into internet banking, you can pay your bills, you can collect your papers, you can give them to accountants. A lot of people don't enjoy doing this because missing bills and keeping track and fighting is something that can be quite tedious. And most companies don't actually offer any of these services, so this is a service which can be arranged, should be offered, I think, but at the same time you have the freedom to choose your own as well. I went twice, no, I went once. So we have actually simplified the diagram for the conversion, so I'm going to go through each one of the steps. This is really simplified with pretty pictures, but it makes sense when you look at the fact that if you have $200,000 in your superannuation and you want to invest $200,000 or your superannuation into that house, you would leverage $400,000 from the bank and you would purchase the property for $600,000. So leveraging is using your capital, using your 200. It might be your combined super. So one thing that on the slide which we took out is mentioned is your super balance can be combined. You're usually combining with your husband and wife, or you can have up to 6 members. Some people put their friends, some people put their kids, but you can combine your super and hence have more money to play with and more deposits to work with. Alan in the Q&A can actually show you the structure of how to set this up. But basically, once you combine your super, you become directors of your super, so all decisions are yours. You're the one who's in control of your money. And if you're leveraging it, there is another process where you have to have a bare trust, which is a company that represents the super. The simplification is here. 200 deposit, you buy a house, you borrow the rest of the money, and the house is yours. That's how the leverage system works. And if you look at numbers, then you can see the difference, and this is where the bigger number is actually much more attractive. Traditional super funds are 7 to 9%, leverage property investments are 15 to 20%. Why and how this looks in numbers is, let's talk about why and how. If I have, it was 200 in the previous example, but if I have $100,000 in my bank account, or $100,000 is a bit too much for a cake, I can buy a $100 cake, or I can use my $100 as a deposit and buy a $500 cake by actually leveraging my initial sum and getting a loan and buying a bigger cake. If I invested $100 here and $100 here with a loan, if that property or if that object or if that cake goes up by 10%, well then 10% of a $100 cake is $10, whereas 10% of a $500 cake is $50. And that's how with leveraging you create more money. So the cakes, everybody loves cakes, everybody loves properties. I hope this explanation kind of gives you a visual of how it works. So the same percent, so the 10% piece of this cake and the 10% of the piece of this cake, when in comparison, this one is 5 times larger. So you're actually making more money. Let's continue and look at this in numbers, please. If I have $100,000 running at 7 to 9%, I'm going to make $7,000 in 1 year. If I have the same $100,000 with a loan on it, hence a sum of $500,000, and it grows at 7%, which is exactly the same. So we've matched them up. We said properties grow a little bit more, especially since COVID. And if you look at the averages in the last couple of years, a lot more. Well, then you're looking at $35,000 versus $7,000. And if we look at this in slightly longer term, then the differences are very, very impactful and significant. $196,000 is what your $100,000 will go to after 10 years sitting in the traditional super fund. It's spinning on shares, it's increasing in profit. You feel good because you're not going to mess it up. It is going up, so that's better than down. But then when you look at this number, if you actually leverage your money and you keep your investments for 10 years, this also has to do a lot with your age, because you're not going to use your super until you retire. So there's a difference between somebody who is 25 and somebody who is 55 and investing. Or it can be a difference, doesn't have to be. Usually the guy who invests early will have a lot more as the market moves on. So if you look at this and break it down, so the hidden cost of traditional super fund, it's not a cost in the sense that they're taking money and you're using money. It's how much money you're not making. So for every $100,000 that you have in your super account, if you restructure it and actually buy something and let that grow and let that asset work for you, you're making 10 times more money. So you're actually missing out on making 10 times more money than you would be if you're not restructuring. And this restructure, guys, the reason that I started this job is because I'm in a situation where I have to start thinking about this. And people from all demographics and social class, good-looking, smart guys like Peter and Jolt, who are all professionals, I have doctors, I have lawyers, none of them are shown any of this in school. Everybody's somehow living off the fear of don't touch the super, it has to be your safety. And there's a lack of education and information, because once you look at this, it's almost irresponsible not to understand this and not to use this, or try to use it, or see, or explore it at least, which is what you're here for. So the more information you get, the more you can explore your situation and the more you can benefit from it, hopefully. One of the best ways to convince people is to show them real-life examples. We did pick, I think, 2 or 3 examples. We looked at middle-aged demographics, such as this one here. We also looked at somebody who's a little bit close to retirement, and we also have our latest clients, which we can show you, which are actually Ben's parents, which should show you in confidence that if somebody like Ben, and Ben is a very special guy, and I don't mean that in a special way, I mean it in a very authentic way. Ben is a very successful and special guy who actually was so convinced of this system that he put his father in, and his father invested, and it looks good. We'll get to that in a second. Let's look at Cherie and Glenn first, who had a combined income of $280,000. They used this income to purchase 2 properties. One of them was in Sippy Downs, the other was in Burpengary. The prices were reasonably similar, around about $450,000, $60,000 if we average it out. They had a deposit on the first home of 30%, and they had a deposit on the second home of 20%, sorry. So there's the figures, percentages will do for now. The amount of loan that's remaining after the deposit is outlined, and the return of investment on these properties, and this one was bought in 23 and that one was bought in 2020, have been 47% and 70%. This is evident by the increase of the property value, $320,000 and $170,000 on the second one. The current estimate, which is from June last year, on this property is $780,000, and on this property it's $650,000. I think these are these Brisbane suburbs or somewhere local suburbs? So Sunshine Coast suburbs gives you an idea. So what this means for them is they had an increase of $500,000 in 5 years for holding their properties. They paid off their loan because the properties are rented and they're gearing themselves. This is where the management part is important. Most people opt to have super, where their contributions and their income from the super covers the costs of owning it. That's why the whole deposit personal situation is something which we need to be aware of before we give any advice. Last thing we want is a $200,000 for a $10 million property, because then you better have a lot of money to pay them back. What we want to do is use the money in a strategic way, in the right way, in the right locations. if you actually think about this in different terms, they have earned an equity of 5 years in CP Downs, 3 years in Burpengary of $600,000. Now, if you think about it, that's the same as working for 5 years for $120,000 after tax. That's $160,000, $70,000 salary, depending on what tax claims you can make, but just by simply doing something which most people don't know about, or doing something which takes a little bit of effort to do, or a little bit of understanding to do. If they keep the properties until retirement, they will pay 0% capital gains. They certainly plan to do that. We don't know what the world is going to do or what's going to happen. You can sell, you will pay tax, but the whole objective is we talked about generational wealth and ensuring a future for your children. Well, then most of us here are old enough to leave the money in until we retire, I think. The second example we have are Mirjana and Zvonko, which is a slightly higher generational demographic. They have retired. They actually bought and invested properties with Betty. I actually know them personally. It's a nice couple, Eastern Europeans. They have bought and sold their properties and they are retired. So I'm guessing in this picture, Alan, 10 years ago, or 2015, 2017, so about 10 years ago, they bought 2 properties with their combined 250. They bought a property in Bigger Waters and Castledine. That's again, I think, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Brisbane area. Yeah, 650 and 270. They had 20% deposits on both properties. They actually sold the properties. So one of them sold for $850, the other one sold for $415. The increases of value are the difference, $135 and $200 over there. Loan remaining at the time of sale was $460,000 on the bigger one and $70,000 on the smaller one. And after the sale, they repaid the loans. You will see on the next page the results that they got. But the return on investment actually calculated to 27 and 17%, which is once again quite a bit higher and more significant than the 7 to 9% that you would get in your traditional fund. They are retired. They sold their properties after owning them for 8 and 6 years. They sold recently, actually. So they took their super balance to $770,000. Had they have not gone through the conversion system and had they have just left things at the traditional system, they would have a super of about $570,000. The difference is 36%, above 36. That's $200,000 difference for what? For just simply taking 2-3 hours to make the decision and to restructure. And I think that this is something that most people don't know about, and they're almost afraid to find out about it, just in case something goes wrong if they do it. Well, for it to go wrong, the whole property market would have to crash here. And if the code for wealth is the property market, well, then they're not going to let it crash. Certainly not the politicians who own the biggest properties. And the final couple are Ben's parents, and Ben has left because he knows I would have thrown something at him, but you can see his genetic phenotype comes from these people. They have invested in the production of Ben, and they did very well because he really is a very, very successful and interesting guy. Russell and Diana are their names. Russell is a deputy school principal. They had a combined super of $600,000. So as you can see here, I think our examples are mortals who work jobs, normal jobs. They're not making $800,000 a year. They're making salaries, and especially when we look at the younger generation who is making $100,000, $120,000, $140,000, which is where most kids and most people land. It's not enough money to live your life, to take your holidays, and to build something and to buy something. So the demographic that I think this is most interesting for are people who have education and decent jobs, but they don't have the capacity to invest and to buy a property, but they have a super, especially somebody working for the government, a teacher or a nurse. They're getting bigger benefits in their super, and this super they cannot touch, they cannot use until they're retired in their mind, but you can actually purchase and own properties with it. So it's like you buy a pen from me. If I sell you a pen, you can have the pen, you can put it in the safe. Alan, this is your example. I really enjoyed that. But what you can't do is you can't write with that pen until you retire. And that's the way the super works. So when we talked about converting to super, there is a little bit of extra costs to set it up because you have to create the two trusts. And one other thing that has to be done, it has to be audited. Every year, your super is audited. Because once your super is set up, you can use your internet banking account to log into your super. You can use that. You can get a credit card. You can go to an ATM and take money out of your super, put it in your pocket, spend it. And this is illegal. Hence why the super needs to be audited. Betty, you can mention the costs of that. It's a yearly audit, about $1,000, $1,200.
Well, up the cost for this Almane super fund is about 2,700. That would include the accounting, audit, ASIC fees, so you have to pay 2 ASIC fees, administration. Now it is, I guess, it's done by the accountant, so you can shop around, you can look for the best price. The price can go up with time, obviously, as well. The accountants can
Increase their fees, yeah.
Increase their fees, but at the same time, you can shop around, and if they do increase, you can change the accountants, and it's a very simple process.
So it has to be done by somebody who is authorized, a solicitor or accountant. It's actually very easy to do. You could jump online and do it yourself, but it's actually got to be signed by somebody who is authorized to make it. Okay, so back to Diana and Russell. They have invested $600,000 into Wollert and St Kilda. St Kilda's in Melbourne. I'm guessing Wollert is somewhere in Victoria as well. So the strategy here was, with the amount of money that they have, do they want a house or do they want 2 apartments? Well, for various reasons, including their personal preferences, they bought 2 apartments with this.
They purchased a house and apartment, so Wollert, it's about maybe 20 kilometers from
that's a
Melbourne
house?
CBD.
Okay.
That's a house, and St Kilda, it's an apartment, 2-bedroom.
So
apartment.
they've got some kind of attachment to Melbourne. Basically, depending on your strategies, why they bought in Melbourne, obviously they have some kind of connection to Melbourne, and they wanted to buy there, and that's perfectly fine because property anywhere in Australia is along the same trend. What makes Brisbane possibly more interesting is the fact that the Olympics are coming and infrastructure will be invested into like crazy. So Brisbane is going to increase in population. They're going to build the athletes village. They're going to be 1 million buildings between Gateway Bridge and New Farm. Betty knows, Ellen knows all the developers. That's where I am going to be investing as soon as I get my super back up, because once he explained all this to me, I invested immediately. They purchased 2 properties for about 700. They had a deposit. They had a capital growth of 7 to 8% over 15 years. So this time we're using smaller growth figures to make it very realistic for you guys. And we're actually also including the cost to sell the property. So it's going to cost them $50,000 and $58,000 for those real estate agent fees, solicitor fees, and whatnot. But the big number, and the one that we need to look at, is the after-selling profit is $1 million and $2.2 million on these properties projected in 15 years. Now, looking further at that, you can see that they have a balance after the 2 property sales of $3.2 million. They still owed $400,000, which they repaid, and that's how they were left at $2.8 million. Now, if they would not have restructured and they have left their money in the super fund, in the traditional super fund, well, $1.7 million is the difference that you're left with. And this really is the key to understanding why this makes sense. So if you believe in the property market, which I don't think you have any choice but to historically do so in this country, this is the difference it makes just by understanding what we are trying to convey as a message here. The benefits, which we talked about before, is the tax benefits. If they have sold these apartments before they retire, they would have paid $370,000 and $250,000 of capital gains tax. You don't pay capital gains tax if you hold until retirement. Hence, everybody who does this should try to think of the viability of actually holding on. And if we are talking generational wealth, well, then you don't sell your assets. You use them and you leverage them further. So this is a great way to actually get in on the market for those of you that have mortal jobs and positions, because you have money that otherwise you are not using, you can purchase something in your name which is tangible. The Q&A, we can quickly jump into that, but basically, Alan, I'm sure can answer any of your questions, or you can possibly look at the last slide where you explained the conversion process, because some people want to see the procedure of it, and Alan is qualified more than I am to explain that since he's in this industry. But what the whole point of this information is yes, it is to spark your interest. Now, if your interest is sparked and you want to talk about your position a little bit more openly, some people don't want to talk in front of others, you have the option of actually making a completely free complimentary appointment on Zoom in the coffee shop here with any of us to actually have a look at your position and give you some kind of tailored, strategized proposition or advice that we think might work for you. And this is something which I think is very well worth it, because you will have research and you will have information that normally you would not get or you would actually pay for. So we will explain how to purchase, and we'll try to do the numbers to see what this could mean for you in the future. So the QR code I will leave up on the screen here. If you scan it with the phone before you leave, you can just quickly input your name, and you can even pick a date of when you would be interested. Like I said, at your convenience, Zoom, in person, any way that you think is suitable or comfortable for you, during lunchtime, at work, whatever you think works. I think this is a very good opportunity, and I think that this is where you have to use Alan's good looks, accent, and knowledge to ask him anything that you might think is been left out by me.
Go back to QR code.
Go back to the QR code.
Thanks,
so
Tops.
people can scan it. Thank you very much. That's my first seminar on my birthday.
Daniel only joined us 3 months ago, so he did really well with this information. Thanks a lot for that.
It's difficult for me. I'm a very shy person in nature, so this was very nerve-wracking and difficult for me.
But he didn't give me those adjectives. He didn't call me a good-looking brother-in-law before he started working for me.
Now he's my employer, making me work on my birthday and dress like this.